Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fatherly Fandom.
Welcome.
It is Saturday morning,
Yeah.
and we are going to be reviewing episode one of House of the Dragon. Should be pretty interesting. But before we get to that and drop our credits on you, Chris, got one question for you.
Yes.
Why is it that the Lannisters have such big beds?
Hmm. Why do the Lannisters have such big beds?
Well, brother, that's because they are able to push twins together to make themselves a king.
Oh my god. On that note, it's time for the intro. So, yeah, today we're going to be reviewing House of the Dragon, episode 1, The Heirs of the Dragon. So,
That's
yeah.
right.
Fun times had by all.
Yeah. So this is the reintroduction of the Game of Thrones fictional world to all of us out there that enjoyed the last show. And this, Chris, we were talking about, you were saying was the largest viewership ever for an episode of television on
On
HBO,
HBO.
right?
That's right. Yeah, so it was. So a lot of people are really interested in it. And I was going over this with Matt a little earlier in the week. I was a little hesitant on whether or not we should review this show or not, because
Yeah.
I was watching it on my break. I was having a really long and very stressful night. So I watched about half of it, and I didn't know what to think about it. But then the next day, I finished it up, and I was like, you know what? I think I do want to review this show. I think it would be a good one for us to tackle. And there's a lot of things in this show that I really did enjoy, and especially at the end of the episode that really intrigued me and made me want to watch more. So, what about you? What did you think, Matt, when you were watching?
Yeah, I would say if you're on dark times or something, this show is just going to keep you right there.
Right.
If you're having a great
Mm-hmm.
day, what I like about this show though is and it was the same in Game of Thrones. Like there's such levity to every second. You're just waiting for something awful to happen to the characters that you've just started to like, and that was in this show from the beginning. So there was a lot of good things in there that I really enjoyed about this episode, and it got me back into the Game of Thrones
Yeah.
mood because, like I was saying, kind of have to be in that headspace to really deal with some of the the harshness and brutality that's in there.
Right? Oh man.
Um,
And still it gives you all that same brutality that we saw in Game of Thrones
yeah,
as
look
well.
forward to it if that's what you
Yeah.
enjoy because
Yeah.
it's definitely in there.
And like we've discussed this many times before, HBO likes to just be lewd and a little
Yeah.
about their
there's, there's somebody over there that loves waving that flag like, here comes an orgy scene because you're watching
every,
HBO.
every time too. It's just like, ugh,
Yeah.
do we really need this in the show? Probably not. And can I sit down and watch a show with my grandma? Probably not. So,
If your grandma liked skull crushing, I
oh,
mean, there was a lot of that in this episode. I didn't get a full count,
during the jousting,
but
yeah,
body parts were flying or being obliterated almost every 5 minutes. So,
tis
yeah.
true. It was. So it was pretty. It was. I definitely did enjoy this show. It's set 200 years before Game of Thrones, before Daenerys Targaryen is born, and it follows King Viserys in there the first, and about him being on the throne, and him not want him trying to have a successor after he
Yeah.
dies and everything, and his wife is pregnant with what he hopes to be his son and everything, and lo and behold, what happens?
Well, he does have a son, but he has to make a pretty grave decision
Right?
that results in the death of both his wife and his son, which
Yeah.
um, was kind of out of the blue. I will say the editing of that particular moment in the
Mm-hmm.
episode, I'm sure was for shock value, but it was almost lost in how it was shot and then spliced together, and that the maester, the doctor, what appears to be a healthy baby, and then they go to the funeral pyre. There's the queen all wrapped up, and you see another shot of a lone bundle. And I know that whenever I first viewed it, I thought, is that also the queen, just from a different weird angle or something? And then later in the scene mentions that it's the boy, and you're like, oh, whoa, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was the intent, but it was just a little weird how they put that together.
Yeah, it was. That was a little confusing for me, and I was like, oh, he was born and he was, crying with the maester and everything, and then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
we're seeing him on the
Oh, I guess.
funeral pyre as well, too. So,
Yeah. It makes it all very tragic,
yeah,
of course. And, you're sitting there in the audience loathing the king for making that decision anyway. And
right.
one of the worst birthing scenes I think I've ever
Oh,
seen in
jeez,
my
that
life.
was rough.
Oh, yeah.
That was
They
so
did
rough.
not spare on the details either. I just, whew, if you've seen Prometheus,
Yeah,
that was a rough one for me, but this went above and beyond.
yeah,
Um, so, yeah, whew, it was a tough watch on Sunday night. I'll say for the show,
yeah, it was.
but there's a lot of good drama. A lot of things are set up here that, of course, we know will be interesting and pay off in surprising ways that Game of Thrones has always done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what keeps the tension just live and thick throughout this episode, is you really don't know what's about to happen next. And that's what I truly appreciate about this storytelling.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for me, it's like, um, this story about Game of Thrones, as well as House of the Dragon, it's all about this struggle, internal struggle with families and everything else in Westeros, and so we see a lot of the same themes that we saw in the original in this one. But the nice thing, though, too, and I did a little bit of research on this as well, is wow, I'm really kind of a little buggy here. Hello, I don't know why I'm so buggy. Sorry about this, guys.
Technical difficulties abound.
Yeah, I know. And oh, Matt, you're frozen as well.
Are we going
I
crazy?
think we're going crazy. I don't know what's going on here. Let me see. I think, yeah, everything else looks fine. Let me see if I can close everything out. Okay, perfect. I think we're okay. Okay, you're back too. So here we go. So I did a little bit of research on George R. R. Martin and the books and everything that we were seeing with this one. And
Yeah.
luckily, like for this show, George R. R. Martin is heavily involved in this show as opposed to what he was in Game of Thrones. He was pretty involved in the first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones. He even had veto power on who was cast in that first couple of episodes. He wrote a script for one of the episodes of Game of Thrones, but after season 4, he was very hands off and he didn't have a lot of say. And that's usually when I kind of dropped off with Game of Thrones. I watched the whole thing, didn't really enjoy the last little bit of it, but he was really advocating for this show to be made specifically. And apparently there was a pilot that was made, which took place 1,000 years before Game of Thrones. It was filmed, casted, written, everything, and millions of dollars were spent on this one. But they decided to cancel it. And for some reason, they didn't even show the pilot episode to George R. R. Martin. So
What?
yeah, so I really wonder, like, what happened with that one. I have no idea.
So great.
So so this episode, so House of the Dragon, George R. R. Martin is very much involved with this one, as well as. Oh, excellent. Okay, thanks, buddy. So, food's here. Yeah. All right, we're recording.
Awesome possum.
Dads.
We are working, living, breathing dads.
That's right. Okay, I'll be there in a second.
What are you recording?
We're recording on.
This is great.
Yeah, this is awesome. We're recording an
So-
episode of House of the Dragon, a show that we reviewed. So
I thought
Come on back for the discussion of the violent jousting scenes. So
we're almost done. So we'll done in a minute. So yeah, we're two dads making a show. So this is, and we have kids, obviously. So yeah, George R. R. Martin is a co-creator of this show with Ryan Condal. And actually, George R. R. Martin says this is the first of a couple of shows that they're going to produce. So there's a sequel show coming out about Jon Snow, but the other one, which sounds very similar
Right.
to the one that they shot a pilot on, is called 10,000 Ships. And it's about Nymeria. It takes place 1,000 years before when Rhaenor comes to Dorne as well. And they're really
Oh.
excited about that. And like I said, George R. R. Martin is a lot more involved with this show. And it's one of the reasons why I want to kind of cover this, too, is because he's very hands-on with this show in particular. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if that makes it better or if that makes it worse. It's really cool to see. And I definitely did enjoy this episode. But at the same point, the one thing I had an issue with was Matt Smith. Great actor. He did a great job as Daemon Targaryen, the uncle of Rhaenyra, and the brother of Viserys I, the king, in this episode.
Yeah.
Every time I see him, all I see is Doctor Who, So
Yeah.
it's really hard.
And it's impossible not to.
Right.
I mean, I haven't even seen a ton of Doctor Who,
Right.
but I have to recognize another Matt that's
I
out
know,
there in
right?
the world making. And it seems like, of course, we have never interviewed him, but if you're out there, Mr. Matt Smith,
Mm-hmm.
please know that our door is always open to you. It seems like he has wanted to do projects that vastly differ from what he showed us of his acting capabilities
Right.
in Doctor Who. And this is right on point with that. He's almost villainous. He's got some redeeming qualities to him, much like many of the Game of Thrones characters that you've seen in the last series. Nothing's black and white
No.
about this guy,
Yeah.
right? There's a whole lot of gray, and it is just a weird. Sorry, now my dogs want to come and interrupt my day, but it is. It's very interesting to see him in this different role. I think he does a great job, though. I mean, he's a very, very awesome actor to watch, and I think he'll make a good addition to this show. Another great performance this week was the woman that plays Renera Targaryen. I think I'm saying that name right. Her name
Rhaenyra,
is
yep.
Millie Al. Yep. She's an Australian actor, and she nails it in this role. I loved every scene that she was in. One of my favorites was a very tiny moment where, as the newly heir to the throne, she's at the funeral, and she actually, I think, does the funeral happen before? I can't remember, but she's obviously a noble,
Mm-hmm.
and she has to give the order for the
Dracarys.
dragon.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Dracarys.
Yes, Karis. She has to tell the dragon to go inflame or ignite her mother and little baby brother. And she hesitates. There's this moment where she gets stuck on the word. And it's a word that we've come to know from Daenerys and Game of Thrones and all that sort of stuff. So the audience is aware of what's about to happen. But it's just such a great moment that she sends home all the way by her stutter, her inflection,
Yeah.
her emotion from her face. Just everything was so natural to a moment in a fictional world, in a fantastic universe, and that kind of stuff is what I love about this level of fiction that we're seeing in cinema nowadays. Is that even though this is all crazy and this is all fiction and it's just taken so seriously,
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so much weight to these stories. It's a lot to digest as an audience member, and it makes it a very, very interesting watch.
It does. And when we were doing our research on this, me and Matt actually talked about this a bit. We so it all the stuff that we've seen said that this was based off of Fire and Blood, which is basically
That says it in the credits and online, a lot of articles.
all that stuff. So and Fire and Blood, it is based off of that, and it basically is like a history book telling you the history of the Targaryens, from 1,000 years back up to like 200 years before Game of Thrones during the civil war between the Targaryen families, which is known as the Dance of the Dragons. But in doing our research, Matt had brought this up. I'm going to give him props for that. There were actually 2 novellas that were presented that actually tell you beat for beat, basically, the story that we're going to be seeing here.
We're about to
Yeah, I
see,
know.
yeah.
So the first one was The Rogue Prince, and it's all about Daemon Targaryen and before the Dance of the Dragons and everything. And then the second one was called The Princess and the Queen, and that talks about the Civil War exactly between Rhaenyra and what was the other one?
Alice,
Yes. So it goes into detail with those 2 things.
which,
So those 2 novellas kind
yeah,
of spring us
Allison,
out.
if you didn't catch her name, she is a character in this first
Yeah.
episode. She is the person whose father says, "Oh, the queen has just died. Maybe you should go comfort him." And
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was a really awkward scene
I
coming
did
after
too.
that. Luckily,
We didn't see it.
we didn't have to endure that,
Yep.
but it could be foreshadowing of what's to
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
So,
So we might be seeing a lot of stuff from those 2 books as
as
well.
is my shirt here.
Yeah. See, and the
So,
dynamic between that too, like having a queen on the throne, as we've seen in Game of Thrones, it sets up this dynamic that so people won't follow a woman on the throne as well. So that decision by Viserys I to make his daughter, his oldest daughter, after his newly born son and his wife died, was a decision that's going to have repercussions throughout this season of the show, and I feel like we're gonna see that. We're gonna see that division. We're gonna see Daemon Targaryen kind of like challenge the rule of Westeros
right.
as well. So
This decision, yeah.
yeah, so this decision sets us off for the rest of the show, and so we're gonna see that. It's a very controversial decision. You saw in the very beginning of the show when they did the intro, which I really liked. I like that they put us into this intro that kind of sets us up for the whole series.
Yeah.
The king is making a decision because he doesn't have a male heir who to put on the throne, and so he eventually goes with Viserys I. And I don't know if you've noticed this too with these Targaryen men. They seem very. They don't seem like the strong leaders. They get on the throne. It seems like Viserys I is reluctant.
Highborn,
Yeah, he
entitled.
if I'm going to if I would and I think that this is what they meant to portray, but he seems kind of sheepish. Like he would be challenged. It seems like Daemon, his brother, would ultimately challenge him because he's weak on the throne as well. So at least it came across that way to me. What do you think, Matt?
I think so, and he calls him out about that. Tells him he's a weak leader. Another
Yeah.
great moment from the series, like he advances on the throne.
Throne, yeah.
Everybody starts to pull out their swords, and
Yeah.
I thought it was a really interesting set design that they did with the Iron Throne just by itself.
Yeah.
All the additional swords, and the fact that it's a throne made of swords. King Viserys cuts himself on it as another little bit of foreshadowing. All great details laced in there.
And it looked more like the throne in the books too. There were supposed to be thousands and thousands of swords, so there were a lot more swords in this version than we saw in Game of Thrones. So that was a really cool thing that we got to see in this episode. Right. So
I agree, and interspersed amongst all of that, you can hear that classic Game of Thrones beat playing. It comes in many dramatic moments, kind of calling attention to some of the stuff that has to do with Game of Thrones. And all of that is the great work of writer and composer Ramin Djawadi. He composed the music for Game of Thrones, and he's back doing it again for House of Dragons, House of the Dragon. So I think he did a phenomenal job. He made subtle notes in there with the Game of Thrones theme, and then he also brought in brand new themes that we hadn't heard before that were very moving. So
I was so surprised too when I heard more themes from Game of Thrones. I thought they weren't going to sample that at all in the music.
No.
It's so great to see the same composer come back, because that was one of the best things. That's one of the standout things for me about Game of Thrones was his music. And I would download those soundtracks. I have all those soundtracks. still amazing. Like I love those as well. One of the movies that I really do enjoy is called Pacific Rim. It came out a long time ago. I don't know if you guys have seen it or
Right.
not. One of my go-tos and kind of one of my guilty pleasures as well. He does the soundtrack for that too, and a lot. I
Oh,
love,
it's awesome.
right? I love the way that this man composes music as well. So it was really cool to see
Yeah.
that. He did a phenomenal job, absolutely. So I agree, Matt.
Mhm.
Great stuff.
It is. And, George R. R. Martin, like we've talked about as one of the showrunners, is very much influenced by both the fantasy genre in fiction, of
Yeah.
course, Tolkien and all the rest, but also medieval realism.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this stuff that you're seeing in the show, a version of it happened in real life in medieval times or the Middle Ages.
Yep.
The big showcase this week, of course, was the jousting competition.
Mm-hmm.
Now, jousting has its basis in reality, started in around the end of the 11th century,
Mm-hmm.
and was very much an extension of cavalry battles that were happening at the time, but then transformed into a sport that actually became something that the knights were involved with, eventually nobility and royalty were involved with. And it was a very brutal sport, much unlike what you saw displayed in the episode.
Yeah.
Now, not every jousting competition resulted in a competitor's death. In fact, a lot of times they would compete for points. Dehorsing, of course, would be part of that. Um, but that's when we saw some of the chivalry actions that became part of the Middle Ages come into effect in the jousting sport as well. And I was really glad that in this episode, you saw some of that effect. You saw, I forget his name, but the prince from Dorne that was raising up his mace about to kill Prince
Damon. Yeah.
Daemon and asks him to yield. That's a very chivalrous thing,
Mm-hmm.
along with the giving of the garters from the princesses and
Yeah.
stuff
Their
like that.
favors.
Exactly. Yeah. So all of that has to do with the chivalry laced throughout the latter Middle Ages. And it was nice to see that in such a brutal fictional world for some of that to be in there as well, because it was very much a part of jousting
Yeah.
and those competitions. Now, like I said, jousting was very dangerous. People, of course, would get injured in the torso a lot, but they also got their knees quite a bit injured, which I was surprised when I was researching this to find that out, because jousting for hundreds of years was done with horses and knights actually just racing towards each other, sometimes at 50 to 60 miles an hour, and slamming their bodies, horses, and weapons into each other. It wasn't until 1429 that they actually started using a tilt, they call it, which is that center bit of wood,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes it's a rope that separates the two competitors. And the idea, of course, there is that it keeps them both in their lanes. So it's really the lances that are connecting
Gotcha.
with the riders. So, along with that development, of course, armor became a huge part of the jousting technology that was invented. A lot of armor that was used in jousting wasn't used anywhere else because it was so heavy. It'd be one-sided to protect the side that could be lanced. Um, but it didn't always work, as we saw in the episode, and it happened in real life several times. In fact, King Henry VIII, which one of the dreaded historical figures in European history, he was known, of course, for having the six wives and being a terrible ruler. He was a giant advocate for jousting, did it himself many times.
Mm-hmm.
And some historians believe that injuries he suffered once he got hit right in the face with his visor open with a lance. Another time he was dehorsed, his armored horse fell on top of him, and he went unconscious for 2 hours. The kingdom literally thought that their king had just died in front of them,
Jeez.
and yeah, and he got up and essentially turned into a different person. His wife was totally freaked out at the time. It was Anne Boleyn. He had a miscarriage, and she was carrying their male heir at that time. And because of that, he King Henry VIII got up. He was so upset. He basically disowned her at that point, and 6 months later had her executed.
Jeez.
So jousting has had a very significant historical effect in England, but also in France, where the whole thing got started. In 15, I think it was 1559, King Henry II of France was actually killed because of a jousting match where he took a splinter so deep in the eye it actually got up into his brain and caused an infection that he died of a few days later. And after that, jousting really trailed off. It lost favor and was sometimes in parades and things like that, but it basically died until I couldn't believe this in my research, but until 1970. Incredibly enough, there is now full contact jousting competitions that occur around the world. And in fact, if you go to the description part
Mm-hmm.
of this podcast, you will find a link to the website for a group called the Knights of Mayhem. And these are actual jousters. They're ex-MMA fighters, bodybuilders, bull wrestlers, both men and women that compete in competitions everywhere. You can go on that website and find their schedule and go see an actual, real live jousting event. And these are not stage performances like you might see at a Renaissance fair, which
Mm-hmm.
still takes a whole lot of skill to pull off. But this stuff is full contact jousting, as they call it, and it is incredibly interesting and could be viewable in a city near you. So go check them out.
Wow. Yeah, definitely check out that. We'll put the link in the description below so you can check that out. And it's crazy how, like, you can definitely tell that George R. R. Martin took a lot of inspiration from the English monarchies and the histories in the real world. And you should
Yeah.
definitely see the parallels from the stuff you were explaining there for what we're actually seeing in the House of the Dragon. So fun
Yeah.
stuff, Professor. It's great to hear about all this jousting stuff. And
Glad I could drop some knowledge on you.
yeah, I don't know if I'll be jousting anytime soon.
I
I
mean,
feel
it
like
looks, go
looks
watch
great.
the videos. It looks so brutal. It looks just
Yeah,
like
right,
the show. I don't know how people endure it, but
right. And so and we see this jousting in this episode because like this is basically peacetime in Westeros too. So
yeah.
they're definitely wanting to hone their skills as knights and show off their prowess and like these characters are not in wartime, so this is the time for them to get out there and do that. And it's very brutal, and some of
Yeah.
those shots are very hard to see, and it's just like woo. But
Like you mentioned with those novellas, something tells me that that
yeah,
piece won't last. So,
no, no. So we're getting ready to go, ramped up and ready to go. So it'll be interesting to see what happens further. So let's go ahead and talk about our ratings for this show. So what do you give this show out of 10, Matt?
well, with the acting and the music being on point, of course, we've got great production value. I wanted to give it a high rating. It is brutal. It is hard to watch in areas.
Right.
You are going to see excessive violence, excessive nudity. It is HBO.
Yeah.
Um, and so if those types of things are off-putting to you, this is not going to be the show for you. So because it kind of, in a tiny way, obviously the viewership shows that a great many people are enjoying this content, but because it does sort of limit its viewership, I would say I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 as a rating. What about
All
you,
right.
Chris?
All right. So for me, it's hard for me to get back into a series surrounded by characters and the history behind Westeros. I read the first couple of books of Game of Thrones, the different books that came out, and I was very disappointed in the final season of Game of Thrones. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. I didn't enjoy
Yeah.
it. I feel like a lot of us fans felt a little let down by it as well, and it kind of wrapped up in a way that wasn't as succinctly perfect as the first few seasons of Game of Thrones. So getting into this was very hard for me. Like I said in the beginning of this episode, I didn't even know if I wanted to review it. But after watching it, I very much enjoyed the acting. I very much enjoyed the characters as well as the storyline and where we're headed, and the dream, that Viserys passed down to Renera about this winter that was coming, and we have to prepare for this, and we got to make sure that the kingdom is together and united, and we have to be ready for this.
Yeah.
I very much like that, and that
Couple hundred years before it even happens.
So I was like, oh, that's beautiful, and like it's interesting to see that dynamic and that history that's passed, that dream that's passed down from king to queen to king to king, as well, and we know that that's going to be cut off at some point in the show, and where we lead on down the road. So the events of this show will definitely have a direct impact on what happens later on. I thought that was very cool. I haven't read any of those novellas, so I just got the synopsis from those, but it does give away a lot of stuff. But I very much am intrigued. I want to see the next episode, so that's definitely a marker for me to saying that this is a decent show.
Yeah.
So thinking about it as much as I can, I'm probably going to give it a 7 out of 10 too. So I'll give it that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I mean, it's, for if you enjoy this type of fiction, like you're seeing these mini movies every single week, and I mean, it's hard to really be that upset. I feel like sometimes as fans we get used to that high quality of a product, and we're almost spoiled by it.
Yeah.
We're like, look, this takes an incredibly huge amount of work just to produce one episode. Like you were saying, thousands, if not millions of dollars go into every single one. We are in definitely the golden age of cinema right now, and I'm just happy to be able to be a very small part of it here.
Be on the ride.
Fatherly.
Woo!
Yeah.
Before. We'll do that every week now. So
yeah.
Yeah.
The trademark.
I'm here
That's
for the ride,
move.
and I'm looking forward to the next episode, which comes out on Sunday night. So we'll review it again next week as well. So I look forward to that. What are we doing next, Matt? I think we're going to be doing something on Sunday.
That is right. Sunday double feature with both Prey, the new movie that came out on Hulu, and it is very much based as a prequel in the Predator universe, which is the second film that we'll be reviewing on Sunday.
Yeah, Silver Screen Sunday. So they're gonna both be awesome to rewatch again. Any reason to rewatch the Predator is good for me.
It's a classic. It's amazing. Definitely my type of show. So I'll be glad to revisit. Haven't watched it in years now. So
haven't either.
Yeah, so it'll be nice to redo that, see how it syncs up with its prequel.
Yeah, and if you want to watch Prey, I believe that it's exclusive to Hulu, right? So
as far as I've been able to find.
You have to have a Hulu subscription.
The Hulu original.
So sorry about that, but if you want to check it out, it's on Hulu. So go ahead and check it out. We'll be live streaming it on Sunday. So we'll be live streaming our show about the review of Prey.
Yep.
So watch it
tomorrow morning. What did we decide? 10 Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific, and everybody else can figure out.
And the reason why we say that is because like I'm in the Pacific Standard Time, and Matt's in the Mountain Time, and because I live in North Idaho, he lives over in Colorado. So those are the times that we like to present to you guys, but you should be able to figure out what time it comes on. And if you're subscribed to our channel, you'll get a notification that we're doing a live stream as well. And so on that note, if you haven't done it already, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out a lot. We very much appreciate everybody who does it. I think we have 20 subscribers right now, but the more subscribers we have, the more we can actually do, and we can record on our phones. We can actually start branding out a little bit more and presenting this to more people. It's going to be a lot of fun. We can include more people in group chats and things like that when we do live streams. So please subscribe to the channel if you can. Support us. And we really do appreciate all that. And on that note, is there anything else, brother, that you want us to say before we
I
get out of
don't
here?
think so, man. I think we got it for today. I'm
Yeah.
glad to have talked about all this. It was a lot of fun.
Yep.
And if you all is of stuff we should review in the future or more things that you'd like to see on the show, let us know in the comments below.
Let us know. Okay. And from our families to yours, from our houses to yours, have a good one.
Good.